Welcome to this edition of Cup Chat with Birding with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Today, special guest Dr. Bryon Stone, aka the Sparrow Man, talks with Dr. Frank about sparrow identification. Hope you enjoy.
All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's Cup Chat. We are very excited to have a special guest with us this week. Dr. Bryon Stone is going to be talking to us about sparrows, and this is a little bit tricky for some people, but before we get into the fun details of sparrow identification, Bryon, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and about sparrows? And most of all, I'm curious about your nickname that you said is sometimes you are called Sparrow Man, and your Flickr album is called Sparrow Man Sparrows. So I think we need to hear about that to start off a little bit.
Okay. When I was about 10 years old, I was bitten by a radioactive sparrow. And ever since then, each winter I would molt, undergo a complete body molt, and become Sparrow Man. And I did not understand the significance of it until I started birding. I was a reluctant birder when I was younger. My mom, our family had one pair of binoculars and 4 kids. So I got a tip for those of you who have kids: get a pair of binoculars. They don't have to be expensive. Go to Academy and buy a under $100 pair of binoculars. And so we had one pair of binoculars, and the thing I hated most to hear on Sunday morning was my mom saying to my dad, "Oh, honey, let's go for a drive out in the country." Oh, no. Oh, my God. Sitting in the back of a car and stopping every now and then. It's either she'd see a bird she'd want to look at, and she'd look at it, and then she'd hand the binoculars to my dad, and he'd look, And then sometimes the binoculars would come into the back, and I'd have to share them with my brothers, which did not seem fair to me since I was the oldest. I should have gotten them. Or she'd see a big rock and say, "Oh, honey, let's get that one." And he kept his tools in the back and his shovel and pick, and he'd go out and get them. But then, so I was into consumptive outdoor recreation. If I could catch it or kill it, I was interested in it. But I realized sometimes, well, number one, we weren't wealthy and didn't have a place to hunt deer on my own. And the second thing is, at least not great places. And the second thing is, when I was sitting up in a deer blind once when I was in high school, late high school, and things were slow, and I heard this sound. It sounded like a deer snorting, but like a doe snorting alarm call. But it kept doing it. It got doe, and then a bird popped into view, and it was a brown thrasher that I recognized because it was making this noise. It sounded a little bit like a deer snorting, and so I thought, that's interesting. And I took a class at the university. It was a community, I can't remember what they call them, but taught by a friend of my mom's. Of course, she knew everybody, all the birders and all the nature freaks. And so I got into birding, and then I went off to med school in Houston and did my undergrad or postgrad in San Antonio. But when I came back to Austin in my practice, and I got involved in the birding scene again, and by the first few years, I didn't bird. I was just working all the time. But by the late 90s, I was doing some birding, and I got a call from Sheila Hargis. And she says, "Bryon, I'm with Travis Audubon Education Committee, and we need somebody to teach a class on sparrows. Would you be interested?" That's why every winter I molt into this alternate plumage of Sparrow Man. I realized, that's my calling. And so about 21 years ago, I think it was year 2000, either 99 or 2000, I started teaching sparrow identification class for Travis Audubon. And because it's something growing up in Central Texas, if you're a birder, sparrows in the winter, I mean, they're a big thing. Here in Central Texas, year in and year out, here, especially on the edge of the plateau, we have 20 species of sparrows, native sparrows, day in and day out between late November and early March. They're there every year, almost everywhere. Some of them, like Savannah sparrows, are very widespread and abundant most years. Chipping sparrows, another one, pretty widespread and common to abundant most years. Some of them, like eastern towhee here, is pretty hard to find, but they are present every county and every winter. And so, it's a thing. So I started teaching sparrow classes for Travis Audubon, and then I started doing workshops. And because if people in, somewhere Texas wanted me to do a sparrow, I'd get to go to somewhere Texas and do some birding in a place that I hadn't been before and teach people about sparrows. So and then people, he's the Sparrow Man. And so I thought, oh yeah, Sparrow Man. So anyway, that's me, Sparrow Man.
That's perfect. That's awesome.
That's a true story.
That's a really neat story. Yeah. So Sparrow Man, we are going to really just dive in today then with the sparrows. But for a beginner, that can seem really daunting, as you mentioned, especially if you live in Central Texas and you've got 20 species and they're all small and they're all brown with some streaky things on them. How do you break them down and kind of break down for us why we're calling today 5 Spizellas and an imposter?
Sure. So when I teach a sparrow class, sparrow identification class, we go over those 20 plus about 5 species that I call bonus birds that we don't have. One of them we have almost every year, in spring and fall migration. Another we have sometimes. One of the clay-colored sparrow we have in winter migration. I mean, in spring and fall migration, very infrequently in the winter. Although you get down to San Antonio, as far south as San Antonio, you start having clay-colored sparrow regularly in the winter. Cassin sparrow we don't have here every year, but some years they breed here, and every once in a while we'll find them in the winter. So we have some bonus birds. So we have 25 species. So I spend way more than 30 minutes. In fact, I typically do in my sparrow classes, I do 4 2-hour sessions. So that's 8 hours of instruction, and there's a fair amount of it that's repetition. And before the pandemic, I would do field trips also. So what I'm doing to simplify for you guys is, number one, choosing a topic that I think is relatively uncomplicated, but there's a little bit of tricky parts, and I'm gonna. So I've kind of narrowed it down. We're going to do the Spizellas. We're going to do the mostly non-streaky breasted sparrows, the Spizellas. And then the second thing is I'm going to tell you what to look for and where to look, and that, because that makes a difference. And then give you some ideas about, where to go from here. All
right. So let's dive right in.
I'll be awake enough to do it. Shall I share screen now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And do we have all parts of Texas represented, or do you know? Do we have anybody from the Valley?
I don't know if we have anybody from the Valley. So usually when Emily is with us, she runs this part, and she's really good at keeping track of Facebook while we are running this. I'm not as good at that, so I can't see who's on right now, but I think we've got usually from everywhere. Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, we've got Rio Grande Valley.
So
we've got everybody.
Okay, very good. Very good. So another reason that I'm presenting the birds that I'm presenting now is I had understood that there could be people from all parts of Texas. And so want to give y'all something that I know that you've got. And so we're going to start with chipping sparrow. We're going to do the Spizellas. We're going to start with chipping sparrow, Spizella passerina, chipping sparrow, field sparrow. chipping sparrow occurs in all parts of the state at some time of the year or another. In the valley, it's in the winter. In some parts of southwestern Texas, mostly in the winter. In the Trans-Pecos, they breed up at high elevation. So in the pine, the mixed pine oak woodlands and the pine ponderosa pine forest, they breed. They occur at lower elevations in the winter. In central Texas, on the plateau, we have chipping sparrows breeding. But the rest of central Texas, we have chipping sparrows the rest of the year. And on the plateau, chipping sparrows are here year round. East Texas has chipping sparrows year round. Panhandle gets them probably in migration and winter. There are a few places in the Panhandle where they get wide. Everybody's got chipping sparrow. Now let me say, and we're going to do chipping sparrow, field sparrow, which occurs in the eastern half of Texas primarily, not so much in the Trans-Pecos, although it occurs there irregularly. Clay-colored sparrow, which is one of those mid-continent specialty birds, at least in this part of the continent. They migrate through the central and eastern part of Texas, but they do occur in migration in the Trans-Pecos too. And then we're going to do a Brewer Sparrow, which is primarily a bird of the western U.S. and occurs in the Trans-Pecos in migration in the winter. And then we'll do the other white meat, the black chin sparrow, which is a Trans-Pecos bird. And then we'll do the imposter, one of the zonotrichias, which can zonotrick you into thinking it might be a Spizellas sometimes if you're not careful. So sparrows. Sparrows primarily are either grassland birds or scrub birds, mostly. Although some sparrows like chipping sparrow breed in pine or oak woodlands. So in the plateau, they breed in places where there are live oak savannas, and they forage in short grass areas under the shade of live oak trees. But these are mostly grassland birds, and the Spizellas, for the most part, the ones that we're going to talk about, have not been severely impacted by human activities, but a lot of sparrows have been. So one of the things I want to say is, if you care about birds, and I think most of you probably do if you're interested enough to be watching, a presentation on bird identification at this early hour of the morning. If you care about birds, you should care about conservation. And so I urge you to get involved with a local and national conservation organization, with your local Audubon, your Texas Audubon, National Audubon, Nature Conservancy. Get involved, as I did almost 20 years ago, with the closest wildlife refuge. So Friends of Balcones Refuge is an organization that has helped me put on Sparrowfest now for 18 or 19 years. Get involved with those organizations. Find out what you can do to reduce your carbon footprint. Find out, it's not that hard. Find out what you can do to reduce your use of single-use plastic. My wife, a couple of months ago, she got fed up with all of the plastic that we were, the yogurt, we go through 2 cartons of yogurt a week. She said, I'm making my own yogurt. She got some quart jars. She's been making yogurt, and we've cut our plastic, consumption of those yogurt quart containers down from 2 a week. And there's debate about how recyclable those things are. Apparently, the main things that get recycled are the plastic milk jugs and the plastic soda water bottles. And those are the main ones. So get involved in conservation, because you can do it. And we need to do that to help the birds and everybody else. So chipping sparrow and Spizellas. Spizellas are small, slender, long-tailed, and non-streaky breasted, at least when they're adults. One of the things that you need to keep in mind. Almost all sparrows can be streaky breasted when they're young, but Spizellas are mostly non-streaky breasted when they're adults. Chipping sparrow is it has either kind of rusty or kind of brown and black on the crown. It has a pale supercilium, and it has a dark, what I call a transocular line. So chipping sparrow, the lore is dark, and notice it's got this dark eye line that goes behind the eye and intrudes into the eye ring here. And you can imagine it's got this line that actually goes through the eye and into the front. This is the lore. The lore is dark on chipping sparrow. It's one of the things you keep in mind. One of the things that I tell people in my sparrow class is that sparrow identification is a cerebral activity. Concentrate on the markings on the head, because sparrows, think of sparrows, they want to know who each other are, when they're in a flock. And if they're down on the ground, feeding down in the grass, feeding, finding grass seeds and stuff like that, every once in a while their heads are popping up and say, who else is around me? What can they see of each other? It's mostly on the head. They're not like wood warblers that are in, most of which, not all of them, but most of which are in these very vertical three-dimensional environments. So, warblers, some of you know that you can identify a lot of warblers just looking at their butts, looking at their undertail coverts, undertail pattern and undertail nail warbler ID. Sparrow identification is cerebral. Focus on the head, because that's where a lot of the important field marks are. The other thing about chipping sparrow, one more thing, is the bill is often, sometimes it'll be completely pink and sometimes it'll be completely dark, but a lot of times, most of the time, there's some dark on the bill, and a lot of times the upper mantle will be a dark and the lower mantle will be pale with a little darkish here. They're non-streaky breasted. They got a little bit of a malar streak here. I call this malar, M-A-L-A-R. This is the mustachial, and this is the submustachial, this pale area right here. And this is the malar streak, and that's an important mark to note. Notice it's, really, this is not streaky breasted. It's got a couple of sort of little wing bars here, but they're not they don't really stand out real great. The wings are not real long. The tail is pretty long and notched on chipping sparrow. Okay, let's see if we can go to the next slide, please. Yes, there we go. Okay, here's another look at a chipping sparrow. Sort of a fairly typical winter looking bird. Notice how really dark the lore is here. You see a little bit more of a broken eye ring on this bird. Sometimes you see that, and sometimes you won't, chipping sparrow. But the postocular line is dark. It'll either be dark brown or black. Often on chipping sparrow, it's black postocular line, and the lore is dark, noticeably darker than the background color. The crown is kind of streaked, rusty and black and brown. There is usually not a very well-defined median crown stripe, central crown stripe, usually not on chipping sparrow. Underparts tend to be pale gray and unstreaked. A lot of times you'll see a little bit of smudges here, but most of the time it just looks plain palish. Sometimes the upper wing bar will be whitish and the lower wing bar will be buffy. Sometimes they're both buffy, as in the last bird we saw. Tail proportionally pretty long. These are small birds, small. Yeah. So this is a bird that I photographed the same day, same location. It looks slightly different, but same size, same shape, small, non-streaky breasted, slender, long-tailed. The crown is more rusty. Maybe this is an adult bird, and this bird here is a first winter bird. I'm not sure about that. But sometimes the crown will be more rusty. When they get in a complete alternate plumage, they get a real completely rusty crown and a very dark eye line, and this supercilium here will get white. But notice how the lore is dark. And notice how the bill is pinkish at the base and dusky on top and at the tip. All right. And notice that the gray nape is about the same color as the gray on the underparts. And here's a look at two more sparrows that did I photograph these the same? Yeah, photographed the same day, same place. Here's one with a real rusty crown, very black eye line. You can see it's starting to get some white feathers up here in the supercilium. Dark lore, dusky bill with a little pink at the base. Non-streaky breasted, non-streaky. And this is just, you know, a little more, it's maybe a first winter bird, more brown and black on the crown. Again, dusky bill, dark eye line. It's not quite as dark as the other one, but notice the lore is dark. This one, this is about as good a median crown stripe as you'll ever get on chipping sparrow. Another chippy, dark lore. Chippy, classic chippy. I photographed last month in Bastrop County. Bright rusty crown, dark transocular line, little bit of a mailer streak, unstreaked, pale gray down. These are slender birds, long notched tails, dark lore, dusky bill. Chipping sparrow. Now, field sparrow, Spizella pusilla, field sparrow. Looks superficially similar to chipping sparrow, but a couple of differences. Number one, except for the shadow, which birds often, where they can place their eye in the shadow and they'll move their eye in and out of the shadow. But the lore is pale here. The postocular line does not meet the eye ring here. And notice that the bill is completely pink. And notice that the postocular line is rusty, and it's what I call low contrast rusty, and the crown is low contrast rusty. So completely pink bill. The lore is pale. The postocular line does not meet the eye and does not extend in front of the eye, and it's got a complete eye ring. Here is another bird in a different pose. This is field sparrow. Field sparrow has this usually complete white eye ring and pale area in front of and behind the eye, and the markings on the crown are low contrast. See, these are very low contrast markings, and it gives the bird a sort of a blank-eyed look, innocent look, a baby-faced look. My mom called this one the baby-faced sparrow, field sparrow. And notice chipping sparrow, dark line meets the eye ring, breaks into the eye ring, and goes in front of the eye. It's got a transocular line, and the bill is dusky here on top. And the markings on the crown are much more contrasty. Field sparrow, just another look, looking down. Bill is completely pink. I think the bill is always completely pink on field sparrow. And for those of you in Southwest Texas, you think you might get lucky and see one of the world's rarest birds, a Worthen sparrow, coming up from the Monterrey, Mexico area. It's not going to happen, but just in case. They look like this, except they have black legs. Pink bill, complete white eye ring. It's usually got a pretty good white wing bar, non-streaky breasted, long notched tail, field sparrows. And here's one just showing the low contrast rusty on the crown, low contrast postocular line, white eye ring, completely pink bill, field sparrow, field sparrow. This is an image, field sparrow with a Savannah sparrow, showing Savannah sparrow is a pretty small bird. Chipping and field sparrows are as small as or a little smaller, but they got a different body shape. They're a little longer, more slender tail. Okay, then we get clay-colored sparrow. So clay-colored sparrow in South Texas, you get this bird in the winter and in spring and fall migration. When they come through in the spring, they sing this buzzy little insect-like song that to me sounds like the sound of an electric weed eater a block away going buzz, 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 buzz. And they have they're more contrasty on the crown, and they've got a good white median crown stripe. I'll show you in a second on another bird. And they've got this pale area around the eye, but with a more contrasty postocular line. So look at field sparrow, which has this bright white eye ring and low contrast postocular line. Clay colored sparrow has, the eye ring is not prominent, and it's got this pale area around the eye that I call a pseudo eye ring and a dark postocular line. And also the gray on the nape of clay colored sparrow often contrasts with a sort of a sort of a pale tan color on the side of the breast. This is a typical look in the winter, and this is a typical look in the spring. They're a little more contrasty, and when they come through in spring migration, I photographed this at my cousin's farm up in the Panhandle in Texas in early May. But you could see birds like this in Central Texas, or you could see birds like this coming through South Texas in mid-April. And they sometimes have a noticeable eye ring, but they've got this pale area around the eye that gives it a pseudo eye ring kind of look. And they've got a white median crown stripe, pale gray nape that contrasts with a kind of clay tan color on the side of the breast. Clay colored sparrow. Just another look gives you that look at the median crown stripe. Then we're going to go to Brewer Sparrow. So Brewer Sparrow, Western bird, very hard to get this bird in Central Texas. Although last year, a year ago in the winter, we had a really good year. Unfortunately, Sparrowman did not get to see any of those Central Texas birds, but a lot of other people did. They were reported in Travis County, Williams County, and some other places. So Brewer Sparrow is the smallest of the Spizellas. It'll have the smallest bill of all the Spizellas. Brewer Sparrow has this finely streaked crown, but it's about the same size and shape as these other birds, but even a little smaller bill. But it's got a complete and a finely streaked crown with no well-defined median crown stripe. Brewer Sparrow, another look, complete eye ring, finely streaked crown, long tail, non-streaky breasted. Brewer Sparrow, hard to get here, but if you're in the Trans-Pecos, if you're in down along the river in Big Bend National Park in the winter, you can get chipping sparrow, field sparrow, chimney sparrow, Brewer Sparrow, and clay colored sparrow all in one spot in the winter. Okay, the other Spizella in Texas is black chin sparrow, and these birds are Trans-Pecos birds, and they just almost never occur east of the bird. You got to go out to West Texas. I photographed this bird in far West Texas, but notice non-streaky breasted. They're small. They're about the size of the other Spizellas. They're small birds, long notched tail, pink bill, gray, little dusky around the base of the bill, little dusky here. I couldn't get this guy's head in the sunlight. Handsome birds. Now, what's that imposter I told you? Trip you up sometime, or someone you know and love, it's gonna trip them up. So beware the first winter white crown sparrow. When they look like this, when white crown sparrows, Zonotrichia leucophrys. When white crown sparrow looks like this after their first winter, when they get into their second year, sparrow or a field sparrow. But when they look like this, they get this rusty crown, got this dark postocular line, kind of breaks the eye ring. And sometimes on some of these birds, the lower will be dark, and on sometimes it won't. But they can look an awful lot like a chipping sparrow, but they're at least twice the size of chipping and field sparrows. Sooner or later, someone that you're birding with is going to identify this as field sparrow or chipping sparrow. Just be forewarned is forearmed. This is chipping sparrow. Sometimes they look like this, and the lower is not quite so dusky. And just a reminder that all sparrows start life as streaky breasted sparrows. This is a Spizella. This is a juvenile chipping sparrow that I photographed in the Texas Panhandle in summer. Dusky lore, juvenile chipping sparrow. But by September, October, these marks have all worn off. Imposter, go out there and get them. You've got them, possibly a few of these even in your yard. Thank you.
Perfect. Cool. Thank you so much. So you mentioned Sparrowfest. That happened already this year. That was last weekend, correct?
Yes, Sparrowfest. We have either the last Saturday in January or the first. Typically, it's been the first Saturday in February. It's a fundraiser and community outreach and fun effort for Friends of Balcones National Wildlife Refuge, and we started. I think this was our 19th year. It started in 2004. There's a Wall Street Journal FW Eric came down and did our first Sparrowfest with us and wrote an article about it in 2004. Pretty sure he called it "Sparrows, a tough nut to crack." If you look it up and you can find it. But yes, Sparrowfest, Sparrow classes, Travis Audubon. I have taught some classes for TOS, Texas Ornithological Society. I'm on the board of TOS, and sometimes those classes are available by Zoom. So stay plugged in, stay tuned. Maybe we'll see you out there in the field,
Yeah, all those things.
Looking for those field marks on the heads. You got any other questions? And
yeah, no, I was just gonna
past our time now, but
yeah, you're good. I was gonna let everybody know all those things are free to join and sign up and get Travis Audubon newsletters and stay plugged in and join Bryon at Sparrowfest next winter if you'd like. So thank you so much. Next week we have one of our birding buddies is going to join us, and so we're going to be talking a little bit more about her. She lives in the hill country. Barbara, I just totally blanked on your last name, Barbara, Pankratz is going to be coming with us during Birding the Hill Country. But even if you're not coming to Birding the Hill Country, we hope you'll come learn from Barbara a little bit about her experiences in the hill country. So thank you again so much, Dr. Stone, and we hope you have a great day.